What's going on, guys? So food palatability is the most important thing, at least one of the most important things in nutrition and health in general. And just by simply saying how food tastes and how much of it you can eat based on that taste can tell us so much about the food, from whether it's natural or man-made, whether it's good for us or not, how it applies to contexts of certain diets. So obviously you have sweet, salty, savory, umami, bitter, sour, and a chef's job is really to create a combination of all these flavors to make a food as palatable as possible. But once you restrict your dietary intake based on certain foods, that capability becomes much more difficult. So first I'm going to talk about hyperpalatable foods, because that's probably the term that most people are familiar with when hearing the term food palatability. Now when you talk about ice cream or bacon, what makes a food hyperpalatable is adding sugar to it. Just brown sugar in general is a hyperpalatable food. If you guys have ever put a tablespoon of brown sugar in your mouth, then you will know that, oh, I can keep eating this, whereas you putting tablespoons of butter in your mouth, it's a little bit different. Protein and fat will generally satiate you at a certain point, whereas sugar will not. And then once you combine sugar, fat, protein, and various other flavorful elements, we have a problem. As seen in foods like bacon and ice cream, where the combination, bacon isn't as big of a culprit as ice cream is, because ice cream has a much higher sugar content. But once there's a certain amount of sugar in it, especially in desserts and stuff, it's just, you consume so much of it, you will gain weight if you're going by your natural hunger. One interesting thing I'm going to add to this is, in the context of ice cream and bacon, like in ice cream you have the vanilla or the egg yolk flavor, and in bacon you have the smoked flavor. Now, these flavors are things that I believe humans have developed a taste through fermentation or like cooking methods. So the vanilla aromas or the whatever aromas you get in food, whether you spice it or season it or flavor it, are things that we might have seen in nature from various fermentation processes, or flavors that we might have tasted in animal fats from animals that were grazing on those foods in large amounts. Just an interesting anecdote that a theory I have about why we like those certain flavorful elements and why they add. Obviously you can eat more of a cream that has vanilla added to it than not in most cases. So base palatability is raw unseasoned animal flesh. Base food palatability simply means what is the food you can eat the least amount of based on your natural appetite. So if you killed a deer in the middle of the woods and started eating its liver and organs and fat, yeah, you probably wouldn't eat a lot, because that would be your natural hunger. You would probably gross most people out. They might take a few bites of liver, a few bites of brain, a few bites of marrow, but that'd be it. In order to establish what food palatability really means, we have to start at that point. And then even just going with meat, once you add salt to it, once you sear it, once you do various cooking methods to it, you can consume much more of it, which alters its base food palatability. Now in the context of meat and certain fats, it's not as big of a deal as it is when you're adding sweetened sugar to things, or when you're adding modern food to context of things. Dairy is a bit unusual, because like foods like butter, cream, and cheese, through the processes we make them, same with milk, they're unnatural in regards to their food palatability, although as with seasoning and cooking meat and spicing meat and adding various preparations to it, it's not as damaging in the context of those animal foods as it is when you start adding modern plants, fruits, seeds, nuts, legumes, consuming inhuman amounts of them because of the added sugar. So let's have an example of like a steak. Maybe I can eat a pound of raw meat. Then if I add salt to it, maybe I could eat a quarter pound more. If I sear it perfectly and add salt to it and maybe pepper, maybe I could eat 2 pounds total. If I add a balsamic glaze to it, hey, maybe I can eat 2.5 pounds of meat. And then, oh, what if I add a bordelaise sauce and a balsamic glaze and I have a sweet potato with it? Then I could eat, how many more pounds of food? If you keep adding certain elements to the food, you can consume more of it. Whether it's flavor elements, fat, acidity, sweetness, whatever you're adding, you can consume more of it. So you have to really be mindful just from a base satiation standpoint. If you're going by your natural hunger, you have to be careful about what foods you're eating. If you want to count calories, then by all means, moderation is the word. You could eat. I have other videos touching on what foods that I personally believe you should be eating if you want more details on that. But moderation is generally the answer, and having the base diet high in fat soluble vitamins. But when we look at foods and we say, well, what is the base food palatability of like broccoli or grains or whatever? And it's really non-existent. If a food didn't exist before the agricultural revolution, you don't really want to apply food palatability to it. But just for the purpose of this video, I'm going to. So fruits, their base palatability when fully ripened is unlimited amounts, and that's because in nature you would only have X amount. Nuts and seeds can pretty much be in unlimited amounts, but if you've ever tried to process a walnut or a macadamia nut, you will know that how many of those you're supposed to eat is negligible in the context of the caloric density of your diet. When you look at vegetables, there's no real caloric intake associated with them, or vitamin and mineral intake if you understand bioavailability. And the base food palatability of vegetables is well known to be utter shit without modern interventions of cooking or adding animal fats to vegetables. You can't make modern vegetables taste good without adding either animal fats, animal products, or various fermented products that are modern. Same can be said about grains. If you've ever made a sourdough bread naturally leavened without salt, it tastes like shit unless you put butter on it. It's very difficult to make plant foods taste good with just plant foods. And when you add 30 ingredients to a vegan stir-fry dish, yeah, it can work, but generally speaking there's a sweet element, which is why vegan dishes are palatable. So at the end of the day, guys, if you're trying to determine what food you should be eating, how your diet should be dictated, this is definitely an idea in general that can be applied in various ways and kind of help you logically think about what foods you should be eating.